All right, good morning. Is everyone ready for spring break? My kids this morning were like, is it coming? I'm like, it's just this week. They're like, but it's only Monday. I'm like, I know, but it's coming. All right, just hang in there. It's only a few more days away, but it still feels far, right? I have this countdown on my phone. It tells me how many days and hours till our cruise. And it's like at 4 days and like a certain number of like, it's like 23 hours or something like that. But I'm like, it's coming so fast. I can taste the food already. You know, I'm like been planning my attack for the week on food, of course, but very exciting. I'm ready for it too. What was that? Oh no, I know how to pace myself. Yeah, that would be the worst. Luckily I don't get, knock on wood, I don't get seasick. So I should be okay though. We bought all kinds of like little bracelets and patches just in case the kids end up getting seasick. Did you have a
next week?
Yeah. So it's Monday through Friday. So the entire week. And I don't know if you noticed this, and I'll remind you later, but I did make the Monday that we come back from spring break, because we were virtual at the time when I made the syllabus. I actually have a planned absence that day because we come back that day from our cruise. So I won't be here in time, right? I could try and hurry, but it wouldn't make it. So that Monday we come back, we actually have one more day for us anyway. It's already on the syllabus. I had planned for it. So I will remind you, and I've already made an announcement to go out the night before, just in case you forget. But we won't have class that Monday we come back. So we'll meet this Monday and Wednesday. We'll have a week off. And then that Monday, we'll have that one extra day. So sorry for that. I planned for that when we're still virtual and we're in person now. So obviously I won't make it back physically in time to be here. So I went ahead and planned for that. But otherwise, what we'll do today, we'll finish up chapter 10. So we're gonna finish up talking about lies a little bit. And then we will move on to talking about how we express emotions and some of the basic emotions and what they can look like and so on. I gave you a little like informal like homework thought challenge last time to think of 2 truths and a lie. If you forgot, that's okay. You just have to scramble a little bit more and think of it right now. But what I want you to do is we finished last time by talking about lie detector tests, right? We were talking about how when people lie, they tend to have things that they do that reveal them. And the better you know somebody, the better you're going to be able to tell when they're lying or not. But even in general, if you don't know somebody, there tend to be little things that people do. And we talked about that a little bit. And lie detector tests pick up on that in a little more like physiological way. But they're often very inaccurate as well. So what I'm going to have you do is to get into groups of like 3, let's say like 3 or 4 at the most. And I think 3 is a good number because it's not just 2 of you. So there's at least 2 at a time staring at somebody. What I want you to do is to get into groups of like 3 or 4. And I'm going to give you just a minute. If you need a moment to like remember your truths and a lie or write them down or think of them, if you didn't think of them, I'll give you a minute to think about that. And then what we'll do is we'll go around in your groups and you're going to share your 2 truths and a lie. When it's your turn, everyone will be watching you and they're going to try and guess which one you go out. Now we can't see faces 100%. So that might make it a little easier to lie today. I don't know, maybe can't see. You can kind of tell when somebody's smiling, but it's not as obvious maybe as normal. But we'll go around, try and guess which one the lie is. It's more for fun than anything, but see if you can do it. I think it's kind of fun to challenge yourself that way. So find a couple of people, again, like groups of 3 or 4, and give yourselves a minute to kind of refresh or remember what your truths and lies were, and then go ahead and get started. And then we'll talk about it together afterward. But good luck. See if you can spot the lie. So go ahead, find your partners. Oops. Okay.
First one was
I've been to 80 years. I went to 42. I have 3. Yeah. One. Oh man, we have yeah. I just I have collard. I in yeah, this is so I should and then it was very I
feel like it's the the lie.
All right, does anybody need more time? Anybody need more time? All right, kind of entertaining. I made it around to like a few groups, but did anyone lie successfully? Just by showing hands, who lied successfully? Who are my liars right now? Right. So a lot of you seem like you kind of picked up on people's lies. Like, how did you know, or what did you look for? What gave them away? Any, yeah.
Actually, it was the tone of their voice that changed and the speed at which they spoke.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the tone and the speed.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah.
The statistics.
The
So he
statistics.
sprained his ankle twice, played soccer for 8 years and didn't like coffee. So I figured it was the one that had number to it.
Okay. I like that. Right. Yeah. There was a lot of logic going on over here. Love that. Like, that's way too specific to be a lie. Okay? Or it must be the lie because it's so specific. Anybody else? Other things that gave people away or that you looked for? Anyone ask questions or like have people repeat it? I saw a lot of like sometimes when you ask people to repeat them, they can't remember one, or they repeat them differently, or they add details. Sometimes that can be something that trips people up as well. What was that? Now you know how to cheat. Yeah, next time somebody gives you like a really long-winded explanation for something, ask them to repeat it. And if it changes, that's a warning sign, right? Again, when people give too many details, sometimes that can be indicative of a lie. So I wrote 3 statements down and I'm freaking out that I have to even lie to you. Like, I can't stop smiling just thinking that I have to lie to you. So I wrote them down and I've already completely forgotten them. But that's how bad of a liar I am. I'm like super anxious about it. So something that doesn't even matter. Okay, so I have 3 statements for you. And I'm trying to like stop smiling. If I smile through the whole thing, maybe that just makes it harder. Okay, so 3 things. I totally just can't even do it. I don't know why it's so hard for me. Okay. I'm just gonna not look at try to lie for all of them. That would be too hard or too easy. Okay, 3 things. 1, I have never broken a bone. 2, I once crocheted an entire blanket. And 3, I have 2 younger brothers. So 1, I've never broken a bone. 2, I once crocheted an entire blanket. And 3, I have 2 younger brothers. Okay. So how many of you think it's the first one? I've never broken a bone. I once crocheted an entire blanket. Or I have 2 younger brothers. Oh, I lied to all of you. I did it successfully. So I have broken each wrist twice. I've broken lots of bones, the same ones, but over and over and over again. I did crochet an entire blanket. It's very romantic of me, actually. But it took me like 6 months to do. And I crocheted like this whole huge blanket, gave it to my partner. We still have it. We never use it, but it's in the store. All right. It's very pretty. I think like brown and it's my favorite color. But and I do have 2 younger brothers. One that I broke his nose many times, right? That one, and then a younger you. So I successfully lied to all of you. I have broken my wrist many times. I will have arthritis forever. Right? I couldn't fall as a kid. Is that a?
So I think that your supply was because you told us that you broke your brother's bone before, but you never told us anything about breaking your bone. So we're thinking that you're the bone breaker.
I'm the breaker.
But you never broke them.
Yeah, that feels like it could be my like Game of Thrones names, Breaker of Bones or something like that. I like it. And so for me, I got the lie out of the way right off the bat because it made me feel better. A lot of people sandwiched the lie in the middle, right? How many people put the lie in the middle? Right, several of you. Anyone else go first with the lie? Just get it out, right? Yeah. Or anyone else last? Interesting, we're really split. So for me, if I have to lie, I like to just get it out of the way because then I feel better afterward. Like I could just go from there. Other people sandwich it like they're trying to hide it. So just interesting, different strategies, and we'll move on. But I think it's kind of a fun thing to do. I did this with my kids and the lies were so like ridiculous. Like we played this yesterday just for fun. And like they couldn't remember what they had lied about, which made it just way too simple. And then my daughter just like changed one detail for each one. which was obnoxious. She's like, I like to play this game, I like to play this game, and I like to play this game. Like, that's not good enough, right? Give me more. But again, we tend to, most of us, give it away when we lie, right? Because our body shows emotions physiologically. And even though these aren't perfect, they definitely can detect some of those changes. So we'll move on, but just for fun. I feel like a good liar now. Not really. I laughed through all of it. That probably made it way too hard. But we'll talk a little bit more, a couple more things about emotion. Emotions, obviously, they can be expressed in words, but most of our emotions are actually expressed non-verbally, right? A lot of emotional stuff is expressed through non-verbal communication. Now, you can obviously say like, I'm happy, or I'm sad, or I'm angry. But most of the time when we're expressing emotion, it's something that comes across in our voice quality, facial expressions, our body language, and things to that extent. Right? So the way that we say something can sometimes matter more than what we say. Like you could look at someone and be like, yeah, I totally understand, right? Which conveys like genuine like understanding or like sympathy. Or you can have sarcasm and be like, yeah, I totally understand, right? Same words, but different tones communicate different expression, different emotion. So your voice quality, how fast or slow, the tone of your voice, all of that can convey quite a bit. Facial expressions, smiles, frowns, scowls, right? Like the expressions that we make with our face communicate a ton. And oftentimes we can tell quite a bit from somebody's facial expressions without them having to necessarily say anything, right? So the expressions that we use, and they tend to be pretty universal. A smile is a smile the whole world around, right? So a smile tends to be pretty universal. Whereas like gestures that people use don't tend to be universal at all, right? So when people give things like a thumbs up for our culture tends to mean like I'm good or everything's okay. In other cultures, it's the equivalent of like F you, right? Like you're flipping somebody off when you give like a thumbs up sign. Pointing in some cultures is considered exceedingly rude, right? Versus it might not be in others, right? So gestures aren't always like common across all cultures. You have to be a little bit careful in the gestures that you make, but facial expressions do tend to be pretty consistent. Body language can also tell you a ton. Have you ever had somebody walking toward you and you could just tell they're in a rotten mood by the way they're holding themselves, or that they're tired, or that they're sad, or my favorite, that a couple is fighting? Like you can just tell as they walk up toward you that things aren't going well. I know this sounds like odd, but I love people watching, especially at restaurants, like couples on dates. So much fun to watch, right? And like you don't want to be obnoxious and like creepy with it, but you know, like it's fun to observe people. Like as a psychologist, I can't help it, right? Like I can often tell, and most people can, right? If a date is going really badly, like you can just kind of tell. Or if people are like a new relationship versus like have been married or like been together a long time, like you can just kind of tell by the body language that they have. My father-in-law, I can always tell what mood he's in when the way he walks up, right? Like he walked up to softball the other day and he just looked pissed, and he was. Like you could just see it all over his body. Body language tells us so much without anybody necessarily having to say anything. Yeah. It could be, or like someone has their arms crossed, right? Like when people have their arms crossed, like they might be cold, but they also could be angry or closed off, right? A couple, instead of holding hands and walking close to each other, have a lot of distance, right? Rolling your eyes. Yeah, all those kind of things can convey things. Really interesting in therapy. This is kind of a side note, but in couples counseling or family counseling, you look at where and how far apart do people sit from each other. If I present a couple with a couch and two individual chairs, do they pick the couch or do they sit separately, right? That could indicate like how well the relationship is going and the level of fighting they have. Are they holding hands, or are they like crossed off and closed off to each other? Are they facing each other or facing away from each other? Like little things like that can tell us quite a bit. Did you have a thought?
Yes. If I sit in class like this, does this mean that I'm mad?
It might not, right? For you, it might mean that you're cold, or maybe that's a position you find comfortable. I stand like this a lot. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm mad, but it, you know, if I'm honest and fair, thinking about it, oftentimes people who do this like are anxious, or maybe you're like reserved in a way. And like, I do tend to have like a decent amount of anxiety as a person, like just to be honest. Right? So it could be like, that's an expression of that. I just find it comfortable at the same time. But I can often tell a little bit. I try not to pay too close of attention to it, but I can tell when you're bored. Like I can see all over your face if you're super bored. Like again, I try not to pay too much attention because I don't want to take it personally. Like you might be tired, or maybe this just isn't your like favorite subject and you just have to be here. But I can see it on your body language sometimes. Like some of you just sat up straight, like I don't want to like offend you. Right? I don't take it personally. Like we all have a million other things going on, but you can communicate so much just non-verbally with your body language, especially when you look at relationships between people. It's really interesting. What was that?
You said that earlier, like I had it yesterday, or the day before yesterday, and I'm just thinking like everyone around me knew.
Oh, probably not. The interesting thing is most people are so involved in their own reality that they actually don't notice a lot about what is going on with other people. But I think as a psychologist, I can't help it. I'm always people watching, like always. Like people are fascinating. I mean, that's part of why I wanted to go into psychology. Yeah. So, I mean, and you know, maybe nobody knew, or maybe other people did. The waiter or waitress was like, I know what's up here. Right? Maybe, and maybe not. This next one's really interesting, and this has changed obviously as a result of COVID. But personal space. You can often tell how close or comfortable people are with each other by how close or far away they stand to each other, right? People, when they are comfortable with another individual, might stand very close to them or even touching with them. In general, we tended, this is before COVID, we tend to stand about 18 to 22 inches away from people that we don't know well. The less we know people, the farther away we tend to stand. Now we tend to have different boundaries with that. I don't know about you, but when people get too close to me, I'm like, back off. Like it annoys me so much now. Like I was at the grocery store yesterday and it was like, this is me. This woman stood right here and I was just like, God, like, what do you want? Like, back off. I kept moving this way. And she kept following me. Like we were like doing this little shuffle. I was like, I wanted to put my arm out and be like, 6 feet, lady. You know, but whatever. But I mean, it's so different, right? Like I usually stand back here. Part of it is because the computer's here and it's recording like my voice, so I wanted to make sure I can hear it. But can you imagine? Sorry. Can you imagine if I lectured right? Right? Like I feel uncomfortable. You clearly are uncomfortable. That would be so awkward. We tend to have like natural spaces. And this varies from culture to culture. Some cultures have way less of kind of a personal space or like personal boundary. And sometimes that can be uncomfortable, right? And again, this has changed a little bit with like COVID as well. But we tend to stand closer to people that we're more comfortable with. There's some gender differences here as well, right? Like stereotypically, if two guys are like in a theater together, they might put a chair in between them or 2 chairs. And they spread themselves out versus women are less likely to do that. You're nodding that. That totally happens. You'll see like people who are together in a theater and they're like 3 chairs apart from each other. That tends to be more stereotypically something that men do. But of course, again, it depends on the comfort level and on the individual. But just an interesting thing, we can often convey comfort and closeness with our personal space as well. And explicit acts is more like the gestures that I mentioned. Obviously, if someone flips you off, that conveys a ton without saying anything potentially, or like gestures like thumbs up or I'm okay or any of those things can also convey a lot. So most of our emotion is actually communicated through nonverbal stuff, though of course we can be more direct and say it verbally as well. Lots of theories about how many basic emotions we possess. The 2 biggest ones say that we have either 8 or 6 different emotions. And I won't ask you to list these. There's some overlap anyway. But one psychologist, Robert Plutchik, said we have 8: fear, surprise, sadness, disgust, anger, anticipation, joy, and acceptance. The other really common theory is 6, right? Happiness, sadness, surprise, fear, anger, and disgust. So some overlap. So we don't have a universal agreement on how many emotions we possess. But one thing we tend to agree on is that we can express and understand emotions from a very, very young age. So little kids have the capacity to not only express, but also pick up on emotions that are expressed by others. And I love this picture. There's all these little babies showing showing emotions. This reminds me of like a little baby George Bush. When you see the like little throw totally looks like it with a little thing. But we can see emotions from a very, very young age and understand them, know what they mean, and even express them. But how many we have? A little bit of disagreement. There are a few that tend to be talked about repeatedly. And so we'll talk about kind of three main emotions, just a little bit more. But there are several, and it's also thought that emotions are kind of on a spectrum. I love this little like color wheel up here. It's kind of hard to see, I'm sure, from where you're sitting, but like you have different emotions that exist on a spectrum. So we have like terror versus fear versus apprehension, right? They're all kind of stemming from the same emotion, but different levels, right? So somebody might be a little nervous or apprehensive. They could be afraid, or they could feel absolute terror. All of them are kind of the same basic emotion expressed in different levels of severity. Yeah.
Just like with something with that, I know in like certain therapies and stuff, we'll have like a feelings wheel, and it's like based on like the 6 emotions, and then it branches out.
Yeah.
Emotion, like more specific ones based on like feelings or sadness or anger and stuff.
Yeah.
So that would be like the 6 basic.
Yeah, that's exactly right, right? Like you have this like basic level of emotion, but then we can look at different expressions of it or different levels of it within each one. Yeah, and that's exactly where we get this idea of like the basic ones, but then they can combine together, or we can have different like expressions of each one. Right. So one of the most common emotions that people experience is anger. Right? And we talk about this one repeatedly. It shows up in just about every basic emotion model, that people can become angry. Now, everyone experiences anger. Anger is actually very healthy, right? We tend to give anger a very bad rap. It's the things that you do when you're angry that decide whether it's healthy or unhealthy, but the actual expression or feeling of anger is totally normal, totally healthy to have. And people tend to become angry when they feel like they've had like a wrongdoing against them, right? That something has been done to them like unjustly, or any little thing can really set us off, right? We all have different things that make us mad, right? We all have buttons, things that tend to make us angry or tick us off, right? And they're different for every single person. Everybody has their own things that might upset them. I don't tend to get mad very often. I'm not like a very angry person. It takes a lot to make me mad. But I do definitely have buttons, right? And everybody does. My kids know my buttons. They try not to push them, right? I don't like to be physically hurt. Not that anyone does, but when my kids are really rough with me, that makes me mad. Or if they are mean to their mom, oh, it makes me really mad. So they know not to do that, right? But we all have different things that tick us off. And again, anger isn't unhealthy. It's what you do with it that determines whether it's healthy or not. Right. So if you never express anger and you internalize it, that's actually really unhealthy, right? To never be angry. It can cause you to have stomach aches, headaches. It can cause all sorts of physical issues when people just internalize their anger and never express it. It's also unhealthy on the flip side. If you go too far and you're always expressing your anger, getting yourself into like trouble and fights, you're violent, that's obviously a problem as well. So you want to try and find constructive ways to deal with your anger, if possible, right? What do all of you do when you're mad? Does anyone have what happens when you're mad? How do you cope with your anger? Anybody? Yeah.
I just walk away.
Walk away? That's probably a good strategy. Right? Okay, so going on a walk or literally or walking away. Yeah. Okay. That's great. It's almost like a cathartic release. And I love seeing angry people at the gym, head down, and go like all tipped off, and you can see it. And then there's usually a thing like kind of fades away a little bit, so that you almost worked it out in a way, literally. Other people, what else do you do when you're mad? Anyone else? Yeah.
But I'm really, really angry. I just start crying.
Okay.
So frustrated.
Sure. And that's not uncommon. A lot of people will almost it reaches a point of frustration where you almost just brings you to tears. Anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, that's a great strategy. Anyone in here a yeller? When you get mad, you have to go scream into something. Yep. Right. I tend to walk away as well, right? I tend to kind of remove myself from the situation and try and calm down. But everybody has their own thing. My daughter's, one of them screams when she's mad. Like she just yells, like she takes it out on everyone, and it's not very fun. My other one throws herself on the floor and kicks things. And then they're 7, so keep that in mind. And the other one goes to her room and pops and crosses her arms. Right? I'll take that over the other 2, honestly. But everybody copes with anger differently. The key again is to find ways to deal with it. A lot of people will either remove themselves or distract themselves in some way. I would say exercising or listening to loud music or walking away. All of those things are kind of like a distraction to help you feel a little bit better, to maybe cool up. And I have a couple of clips that I think are kind of fun related to dealing with anger. They're both on the older side. One of them is really old, but it's such a good clip that I can't help but like keep it, even though it's older. So the first one I want to show you is an example of something called catharsis. Right? So sometimes what happens with anger is people shove it down, shove it down, shove it down. And then there's like that one last little thing that just brings it all back out. Right. And so sometimes when it comes to anger, people can have a cathartic emotional release. And it's oftentimes maybe on the wrong person, right? It's like the one person just had the straw that breaks the camel's back, right? It's that last little thing that pushes you over. And catharsis can sometimes feel good, right? You're releasing all that energy and all that emotion, but it can also sometimes have consequences too. So the clip I have for this is from an old movie called Fried Green Tomatoes, which is a really older movie. And there's other examples of this, but I think this one is the best. What you'll see in this is this woman has constantly pushed her anger down, and these 2 women make her mad, and she lets it all out on them. And I'm sure some of you have had, I think it's such a good example of, trying to deal with your anger in different ways. Like one is very cathartic and the other is more like a method of distraction. But you can see at the end, right? Like he's much calmer, he's laughing and smiling. Oftentimes, if you can get somebody to laugh or smile, you can diffuse anger. That's always my strategy with my partner. Whenever we have a fight, if I can make her laugh, I'm done. We're good, right? If I can do something to make her crack up, I can diffuse the fight very quickly. If we're in the car, I'll pick a random bizarre song and put it on, and sometimes that'll work. But little strategies that I use. But anytime you can get someone to laugh or smile, it can diffuse anger pretty quickly. So trying to find a way to distract yourself, ways to deal with anger, ideally in a healthy manner. Again, you don't want to express everything, but you don't want to shelf it and internalize it either. Both of them are a little bit harmful, right, in their own way. Any other thoughts or anything here before I keep going? Anything else with anger? Oops. Fear. All right, so we'll talk about anger, fear, and then happy. Fear is another very, very common emotion that we all feel. Fear is a feeling caused by a perceived threat or a danger. And it can be something that's actually life-saving, right? It can be a vital response to a physical or emotional danger. Oftentimes when we feel fear of something, it's for reasons related to survival. We are afraid of things that are a threat to us in some way, or that could harm us in some way. There's a lot of physical changes that happen when we're afraid, right? Our sympathetic nervous system kicks into gear and makes us feel those feelings of fight or flight, right? Where we're mobilizing our resources, getting ready to fight something off or maybe flee and run away from it. Very common that people will run from things that scare them. Others might tackle them head on. But we can be literally afraid of anything. And sometimes our fears are very logical and very grounded in reality, and sometimes not. We'll talk about phobias later in the semester when we get to the disorders. Phobias are when people have irrational fears of things, right? That they react to a level that is absolutely out of proportion to whatever it is that they're afraid of. So people can be absolutely terrified of things like cotton balls. I mean, of anything really. There are things that people are commonly afraid of that are very typical. And then people can have phobias, irrational fears, which we'll talk about later in the semester. Yeah. Spiders. Yeah, I don't like spiders at all. Right. I'll talk about that when we get to phobias. But spiders are really common. A lot of people don't like spiders. Right. There are lots and lots of common fears. And so again, fear can be very adaptive. And a lot of the things that people are afraid of are things that can be very dangerous. Right. Snakes can kill you. Fall from a tall height, it could kill you. The wrong spider bites you, it could kill you. Right. All these things could be very dangerous. But people can get out of proportion with their fear as well. Yeah. Bees.
Is everyone else afraid of them? Like, there's little insects I'm so scared of.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, bees are a relatively common thing. A lot of people don't like bees, right? Or spiders or certain like insects, right? Very common, right? It often makes like the list of like the top 20 things that people don't like. Yeah, it's not uncommon at all, right? We'll talk more about it a little bit when we get to phobias, but the interesting thing about fear too is everyone's different, right? Like you put two people on a roller coaster and one is like happy and enjoying it and excited by that little bit of fear, and other people can be crippled by it, right? And so it's absolutely all over the place, right? And your frame of mind going into something as well. This is where that two-factor theory, sometimes people can find fear to be like fun rather than being 100% scary. So fear is a very subjective emotion, just like anger. And it can be very adaptive. It can help us quite a bit or go awry when we get phobias, which we'll talk about more in chapter 14 in a couple of weeks. Happiness is the last one. Happiness almost universally talked about, right, is one of the more like basic emotions that we possess. Hard to know what makes us happy, right? It's different for every single person. But we do know that people who are happy perceive the world as being safer, are more able to make decisions, are more cooperative, and live healthier, energized, and more satisfied lives. Happiness is an interesting one in that it fuels more happiness. When people are happy, they tend to look on the bright side of everything, and they tend to be more happy and then pass that happiness on in like these upward spirals. There's a awfully named, but like very kind of common sense phenomenon here called the feel good, do good phenomenon. When we feel good, we're more likely to help others. We're more likely to want to make other people's lives better and to go out of our way to do nice things for other people. When we're struggling or suffering, we might be less likely to do that thing. So I'm having a hard time. I'm not going to make your day better. Not that everyone's that way, but it's less common for people to go out of their way and do nice things for others if they're not doing well and feeling happy themselves. So it's a very common thing that we notice, that people, when they're happy, tend to spread that happiness, and it tends to fuel itself and lead to more happiness. I have a little clip of this that I think is a good example. My kids used to call this Spickle Me's, but from Despicable Me too. They're called, look, there's the Spickles. I'm like, the Spickles, Spickle Me's. I'm like, they're minions, but that's cute. I like it. So forever, this will be Spickle Me. But I'll play this clip for you. I think it's such a great example, and it's set to the song Happy, that we tend to kind of spread that happiness. And it's something that's almost contagious in a way, right? When we're in a good mood, that can easily be like translated to another person. So feel good, do good phenomenon is something that tends to be really common with happiness. And what determines whether we're happy or not has a lot to do with perspective, a lot to do with our experiences and our perspective on things, and a little bit genetic, right? Some degree of happiness runs in our genes and in our kind of how happy we are can be a little bit hereditary, but most of it has to do more with like our successes and failures and perspective on events. And so there are two kind of things that get at this last bullet here: adaptation level phenomenon and relative deprivation. Adaptation level phenomenon talks about like how happy we are based on our like expectations and our previous experiences. And I love this: love, honor, obey, and lower your expectations, right? Our expectations can get in the way of our happiness, right? Oftentimes, if we expect too much or our expectations aren't grounded in reality, we might not be overly happy with things, right? But our expectations play a big role. Think about like if you take an exam in a class, right? If you expect to get an A, you're going to be disappointed with anything other than an A, right? Versus if somebody next to you expects to get a B, right? They're going to be happy if they get a B. That A or B means different things to each one of you, depending on your past experiences. If you're a B student and you get a B, you're going to be thrilled. You're an A student and you get a B, you're going to be really unhappy, right? That B can have a different meaning to each individual person. So our expectations tend to play a big role in how we view events and how happy we are as a result of them. We also tend to compare to other people. And that's where the second piece comes in. Relative deprivation is when we compare to other individuals, right? And I love this quote, right? I cried because I had no shoes until I met a man who had no feet. Right? So much about happiness is perspective, right? What I have versus what other people have, how I view what I have versus what others have. And years ago, my brother, one of my two brothers, that I have, the one that I didn't break his nose, my other brother. My youngest brother years back got a bike for Christmas. That's why I have a bike on here. He wanted a bike really badly. Like he asked for it for months. Like we stayed up all night putting it together for him as like a surprise. It was under the tree in the morning, Christmas morning. All he wanted was a bike. He got the bike he wanted. He was thrilled, through the roof, like happy. He went outside and rode it in the snow. He lived in Wisconsin. It was snowing. He didn't care. He went outside and rode it everywhere. I was just so incredibly happy to have his bike. But then the neighbor kid was 1 year older than him, got a snowmobile for Christmas. He was out there riding around on this motorized, beautiful snowmobile. And my brother all of a sudden was like, this is junk. I should ask for a snowmobile. Like his whole mood changed, right? That perspective of what I have versus what other people have. I guarantee most of you at some point have compared yourself to other people. We do it constantly as individuals. It's almost something we can't help doing. Maybe you've looked at another relationship and been like, I wish we were like that. Or I wish I made money like that person made money. Or I wish I had a job like they had. Or I wish my car was like their car, or like whatever it might be. We tend to compare ourselves to other people all the time. And that can decide how happy or unhappy we are with the things that we possess. So a lot of happiness has to do with these things, right? Your expectations and past experiences, and then also comparing to other people. A few other thoughts with happiness, things about how to be happier. And there are lots of different like ideas about how to be happier. Some of these I think are stronger than others. The first one always drives me a little bit nuts, right? Realizing that money doesn't equal happiness. Anyone else have that reaction of like, yeah, no, I don't agree with that at all. Like I always have that reaction of like, I don't know, if I had more money, I could have less stress. I could get all the things that I want. I would be happier to a degree, right? But that's the problem, is it's to a degree, right? When people have enough money to have the things that they want, or at least to be like comfortable, after that, having more money doesn't tend to change anything. What was that? I've watched the first one, but that's it. The first, why, what are you thinking? Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, I'll have to keep going with that. I watched the first one and then I couldn't get my partner to watch the rest of them, but I want to.
And you would have never expected.
Okay, interesting. Oh, like some of you nodding now, I want to go watch it. Oh, it's on my list. We just started Ozark finally, like, and so we're like 5 episodes into that. But yeah, that's on my list. So thank you. So much of that is true though, right? When you have money, it's only helpful to a certain extent, right? And then after a certain point, more money doesn't tend to equal more happiness. And that's where that idea comes from, that money and happiness are somewhat connected, but it's not everything, right? Money can't buy you everything, but it can buy a lot of things, right? So there's a degree which could be helpful, and then beyond that, not always. Taking control of your time. If you manage your time well and you have time to do things that you enjoy, you're going to be happier, right? If you have time for things that you like to do, that's going to increase your happiness, right? So managing your time well and making time for things you like. Acting happy, so silly, but next time you're really ticked off or really pissed off, like act happy, right? Start smiling, or you might look crazy a little bit, right? But start smiling. At some point, if you act happy, you will become happy. It's that like fake it till you make it kind of idea. Yeah, it's in your mind, right? So much of being happy, like you actually can trick yourself into it. It's kind of bizarre, right? But at some point you'll be like, when did I actually become happier, right? That some of it is very, very mental. You can actually make yourself happier just by acting happy. Doing things that engage your skills, giving your body the sleep that it wants, having close relationships. So sleep and health play a big role. Having relationships that matter to you and connections that make you happy is a big one. Focusing beyond yourself. A lot of people gain quite a bit of happiness from giving beyond themselves, right? Thinking at the bigger picture, thinking of others, being grateful for what you have. I think this is a really big one, right? Trying to focus on what you have rather than what you don't have. A lot of research to indicate that keeping like a gratitude journal or a gratitude log can play a big role in happiness. So trying to focus on one thing that you're grateful for each day, rather than focusing on the things that you're unhappy about or wish you had, right? Not always the easiest thing to do, right? But it can be something that's very powerful. It tends to fuel more happiness. Spirituality makes people happy. Oftentimes people having a belief in something bigger than themselves can lead to happiness and feelings of like being fulfilled. And laughter. Laughter is a great one, right? We tend to laugh less the older we get. Not everybody, but as kids, we laugh over like nothing, right? Everything makes us laugh. Like my daughter runs around the house, like telling the worst jokes constantly. She'd be like, what did the snowball say to the desk? I love you, waka waka. I'm like, how's that funny? All right. Like, and every joke is like that, right? Like everything. Right? Sometimes they're a little better. This morning was slightly better. She's like, what kind of books do cookies read? I'm like, none, because I ate them all. And she's like, no. She's like, cookbooks. Get it? I'm like, okay, well, that one's closer than the desk and the snowman or whatever. Like, it's always just constant stuff. They're always laughing. And we're like, nothing. The older we get and the more stress we have in our lives, the less we tend to laugh at like little things. But laughter has a lot of really good properties to it. When we laugh, it relaxes the whole body, right? It releases like natural endorphins. Your muscles relax a little bit. It has positive effects on your muscles and your body. It boosts your immune system. The more we laugh, it tends to reduce stress, which makes the immune system stronger, right? So there's some correlations there. It protects the heart, right? It increases blood flow and oxygenization. Oh my gosh, I can't talk. And it tends to push more like oxygen through our body, which makes us happier, our blood working better. It burns calories, right? Not a lot, but it burns calories, right? So the more you laugh, the more calories you burn. And it can help you live longer, right? There's all these amazing like positive benefits to laughter. And yet something that we do less and less the older we get. Was that a... Yeah. Mhm.
It's just the opposite.
Yeah. And some people do that, right? Some people are like nervous laughers, right? I laugh when I lie. Some people laugh when they're nervous. Sometimes there's an overlap there, right? And it's almost like your body's natural like, defense of trying to like handle that anxiety of like, I'm gonna laugh to help you feel a little bit better, to release some of that tension. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's almost like a natural defense. So, yeah.
Like, that we don't laugh as much when we get older.
Typically.
Yeah, but I was actually literally just gonna ask you, I feel like I used to laugh a lot more when I was younger.
Mhm.
And now, like, maybe I don't consider that funny anymore. Like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I think we have more pressure the older we get, right? Like now you have like adult pressures or like more stress and pressure on us than when we were younger. We tend to be more carefree, and so we have that ability to laugh more. I mean, that's not always true, but it tends to be typical. I mean, I feel like I laugh a lot. Like my partner watches like 2 hours of TikTok every day. It's like her like guilty obsession. And I watch a lot of TikTok, and so I feel like I laugh all the time. But some people, because of stress and just life, there's no time for it, or maybe there's just more stress and pressure. But it's not universal, but it's just kind of a general thing. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, this is the time to laugh, but this lady that was my first, she's a therapist, she was this school desk, and she told us like how to use stress and like really affect her and their house. She's like trying it out. I was really stressed out about one of my classes. And like her immediate reaction was like, oh no, like I can't fail this class, I'm so overwhelmed. And then I was like, wait, like let me really try to affect her. So I was like, okay, this is gonna be really stressful today, and I'm gonna just power through it and get it done, and I'm gonna feel so good after. And I did it, and I just felt way better. Like,
Yeah.
calming down a lot. So I thought that was like really interesting.
Yeah, and we'll talk about it more when we get to the unit on stress. The way that we view an event, right? The way that we view things that are stressful changes the entire experience, right? And so sometimes that's hard to do, right? Like if we're just honest, right? Sometimes things are hard, they're stressful, they're difficult. But if you can try to reframe it, that's the like technical therapy term, is reframing it or change it the way you think about it, it can change the way you experience it quite a bit, right? So when we're able to do that, I think play a big role in reducing how difficult that event is, right? Or at least to an extent. There's another hand, yeah.
So back to the whole pressure thing. 'Cause I find myself like if we're talking with friends, if something is like, find something funny, I won't usually laugh completely hard until I hear someone else laughing.
Mhm.
So it's kind of like you're saying, kind of sentence where you hear, other people are doing it too.
Yeah.
Just so you don't feel pressure or that, I guess.
Sure.
Is that
It could be, and laughter can be contagious, right? A little bit, right? Think about those mirror neurons that we talked about. When we see other people laughing, we sometimes laugh as well. Like it's almost like like an empathetic like response. Like when people don't feel well or they hurt themselves, we might grimace for them. When people laugh, we might laugh with them. It's very common when other people are laughing around you that like you start laughing yourself, right? You almost can't help it sometimes. And then laughter can get a little bit contagious in that way. And I have a clip. I don't know if it'll make you laugh or not, but this is like my go-to when I need a good laugh. If you have a good, this is my video that makes me laugh, you should send it to me because I mean, why not? That would be fun, right? But this is mine. It's definitely a few years old, but it makes me laugh every single time. And part of it is because she keeps laughing and her laughter becomes contagious and like I can't help but laugh with her. But I'm sure some of you have seen this. It was like really popular like years back, but I don't know why, for whatever reason, it has remained like my favorite laughter video. So I will play it for you. I'll help you burn a couple of calories so you can eat more later, right? Maybe I should laugh the whole cruise through to offset the amount of food I'm gonna eat. But here we go. Let me bring this up for you. Watch it and laugh to it later. But that one's mine. Like whenever I need to laugh, that's the one that I'll pull out and like watch. I have it like saved in my favorites because it always makes me laugh, right? And sometimes just a little bit of laughter can go a long way, right? It can make us feel a little bit better and it releases those endorphins, makes us feel good. And again, it can sometimes be a great like reliever of stress. So yes, Chewbacca, right? And again, I have that mask. You can picture me wearing it at home, cracking up. That makes you laugh. But there's lots of ways to be happier. Again, trying to find ways to increase happiness is important. And there's a lot of connection to stress, like you brought up, which we'll talk about more when we get to chapter 13 in a couple of weeks. So any other thoughts or comments, questions, thoughts, anything? Yeah. Somebody gave it to me because of that video. So my close friends are like Twitch and YouTube reactors. They're the ones I used as the example. And they gave me one for Christmas. So because of that, their daughter had one and I couldn't stop wearing it, so they gave me one. They're like, here, you could stop taking our 7-year-olds, and here's one for you. I'll take it. Any other like thoughts or reactions or anything? Anything else about emotions? That's the last slide with emotions. Okay. So where we go next is we'll look at human development. We're rather than start it and get into it for like 9 minutes, we'll go ahead and just stop there. So what we'll do on what's the next day? Wednesday. I forgot what day it was for a moment. On Wednesday, we will start chapter 11, which has to do with human development. So we'll look at what are some of the things that happens as we age? What are some of the like milestones for each group of ages that we go through? So that's what we'll do. We'll pick up with that on Wednesday. Have a wonderful rest of the day. Send me your funny videos if you remember or think of it, and I'll see you all on Wednesday.